At home on every rural road, Hyundai Country Calendar.
An American couple's chosen this unique site in Canterbury to make world-class wine.
You know, we took the old world model and brought it to the new world.
This wine tastes like wine from nowhere else in New Zealand, nowhere else in the world. And that's precisely what we set out to do.
It's always a risk. It's farming. You just can't control Mother Nature. And you've got one chance every year to get it right.
At Pyramid Valley Vineyard in North Canterbury, they do things the traditional European way, and that takes a lot of people power.
We've got a team of about 10 people here today. We're just shoot positioning and lateral thinning. They're going through with snips or with using just their hands and pulling off the laterals like you do with your tomatoes, and that's exposing the fruit to wind, air, sunlight, everything moving through to prevent disease from happening.
Claudia and Mike Wearsing have their own way of doing things. They've planted their grapes close together and low to the ground, in the French style. And it's taken some Kiwi ingenuity to ease the back-breaking work.
When you have vines that are so low to the ground, it was really hard for us to constantly be bending over. And so we've kind of, over the years, created these trolleys. We started with skateboards, which was kind of funny, but they're not great when you've got muddy soil. So we came up with these aluminum frames. Everybody grabs a pad and you could sit on that really comfortably. There's no back injury. And it also brings you into the fruit zone. It brings you right against that fruit and that canopy so that you could have a really close look at what you're doing and feel more comfortable about doing it. Fruit set's just really in balance. Yeah. It's probably a little bit more meticulous than what you would see in a normal vineyard, but we're aiming for quality here and we're aiming for a very low yield. And we can't take any risks on detritus, so we've really got to get it right the first time. Everyone here at Pyramids are part of our family. I think that's one of the nice things when you come to Pyramid. People talk about the energy here, and it feels like home, and it's a place that we share, and we've shared from the beginning. And Mike and I didn't have kids, so it's really nice to see the next generation thinking about viticulture and what's here for them.
Send them home at the end of the day.
Yeah, but it's wonderful.
In terms of the powdery?
Yeah.
Claudia and Mike have established their vineyard using biodynamic principles, which focus on creating healthy soils.
Well, we know for a fact that in a vineyard, 90% of the biomass is from the soil surface down. We see a vineyard as being what's up in our part of the universe, up here. But if you get your 90% wrong, your 10% is never going to be what it should be. That's like asking to have lustrous hair on a corpse. So you farm your soil first. And we found our soil first, and now we farm it, and the vine just happily follows along. You know, we've made mistakes along the way, but biodynamics is something we would never take back and we would never abandon.
So this is fresh manure. I collected this morning. And we're just going to put a little bit into the horn, like that, and then we're going to use our stick to push it in. I just use my fingers, because I don't worry about it. You'll be eating lunch with your forks and not your hands today. People think it's a little crazy that you fill it with cow dung, but once you've got that vessel and you fill it with the manure and then you put it in the ground, 6 months later you lift it and you've got that really amazing compost with all that microbial activity. Great. Well, that's it. This is 6 months on. So what I've got here is this incredible compost. It's got more microbial life to it than you'd ever find in a compost. We then put this into a drum. We stir it for about an hour with a stick, and we put it into the sprayer, and then we spray it onto the land just like you would a normal fertilizer. It's really the magic of biodynamics. This is just feeding the soil, you know, looking after the land, caring for the land, and this just keeps everything alive and everything going.
Vineyard manager Struan McDuff has adapted to using biodynamics too.
The only word that's guaranteed to get you fired around here is weed killer. And it is, it's just something, all of our weeding's done by hand, and there are times, honestly, where the crew would just love to get out there with the weed killer because it's not a flash job. but it's a great environment. It's the people, basically. It's a good place to work, and it's a hell of an office. It really is.
Claudia and Mike moved from California 18 years ago, following a dream to create a wine unique to this site.
It's funny, when we first met each other, he used to have his nose in a Pinot Noir book every single night, and I thought, oh, this guy's having an affair with Pinot Noir. You know, it was kind of weird, but I got attached pretty quickly. There's something really special about being in the wine industry, and I felt like this was a really good direction for myself.
It's so lifted this year. It's so violet. It's really pretty. This wine tastes like wine from nowhere else in New Zealand, nowhere else in the world. And that's precisely what we set out to do. I can't imagine wishing to be anywhere else.
Their love for the land has seen them turn a former swamp paddock into an irrigation pond and native wetland.
So all we had to do was simply dig it out like a swimming pool, essentially. And then because our clays swell when they get wet, it lined itself and it filled itself. And of course all the neighbors were laughing, saying, those crazy Americans, they're digging this gigantic hole and it's never going to fill. But we had one big rainstorm in the winter and it was full.
But the Wiersings needed a solution to deal with algae and weed that could take over the pond.
With the challenges of having the pond, we knew that we needed a management system, and we needed to find someone to do that for us, and that's when we came across Gray. He drives all the way from Tekapuna down here, and we catch up with him about 4 times a year, and he checks on the pond and makes sure the levels of the algae aren't getting out of control.
Gray Jameson has introduced 2 new species of fish to manage the water quality naturally.
We use grass carp to eat the weed and the filamentous algae, and silver carp to filter out blue-green algal blooms. But I just wanted to show you this time the silver carp. They're now up to size. Yeah. So
oh, right.
That's the silver carp.
We've had the grass carp in the past, but this is the first time.
That's the first time that we've actually put the silvers in. The silvers now are of size, and they're the ones that are going to swim around in the water and filter feed out all the algal blooms, so the water will start to go clear. One of the biggest issues we have putting them in different places is that they're confused with the koi carp. Silver carp and grass carp aren't that at all. We've actually changed the name to white and silver imua. They can't breed in New Zealand, that's been proven, and they can be easily managed. I mean, you look at a pond, the same as you look at the amount of stock you put in a paddock, you work out your stocking rate, and then you put them in, and you just adjust it to suit. Hey. Well, here they are. Here's the first of the silvers to be released in here. You've been waiting for some time.
Absolutely. And how big will these get?
And here they'll probably go about 10 kilos minimum. Right. They could even get as much as 18 to 20.
Wow, how amazing.
Yeah. And also the freshwater mussels. They filter feed on blue algal bloom, the toxic blue-green algal blooms as well. That'll take a couple of years to build up the numbers, but then it will actually turn your water clear.
Right. They're bigger than we thought.
Yes, yeah. Well, what we'll do when we put them out is we try and keep them together so that when they spawn, it's easy for them to fertilise each other. So we're just going to chuck them out in the water.
He's so committed to what he does, and he really does believe that there's much we can do to help clean so many polluted waterways in this country, that if it requires a non-native carp to do so and there's no danger in releasing it, that seems a better way than many.
Grassy?
Wow.
The pond may be getting cleaner, but with some of the jobs round here, you've got to get your hands dirty.
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Mike and Claudia Wiersing grow grapes on a former sheep farm in North Canterbury.
The farm is 200 acres. We only have 2 hectares, 5 acres planted. We wanted to concentrate on just the areas that had the correct soil mix and the right sort of aspect. We have 4 different blocks, 2 of Pinot and 2 of Chardonnay in those 2 hectares. To be perfectly frank, we haven't even planted our best ground yet because I didn't want to make mistakes on what I considered to be the very best plots.
A specific soil type is at the heart of this vineyard.
The soils are a mix of clay and limestone. That's very important. Clay tends to give you, the French call it ampleur. Now you can call it ampleness in English, but it doesn't sound anywhere near as good. It gives you flesh, it gives you volume, it gives you roundness. And limestone gives you rigor, it gives you structure, it gives you energy, it gives you tension. So the two together make a balanced soil. That's a very difficult thing to find. But we did eventually find it here, and so we concentrate on those areas. If you go too high on the slope, it's only lime. If you go too low on the slope, it's only clay. So we concentrate on the areas where the two intermingle. We looked all over the world for many years, but we came back to Pyramid Valley. I'd been all over, but not looked at this one site, and we've been here ever since.
Out in the vineyard, manager Struan McDuff is driving new posts into the hard clay and lime soil. And he's got a secret weapon.
We're replacing the panellised posts which have broken off with an eco post. Traditionally we had to bore a hole with an auger, then we had to use the old-fashioned two-handed manual driver. This does it above that, and it does it really quickly, so it makes a nice change to be able to do something quickly and easily.
Struan's new to biodynamics and was sceptical at first.
It's really strange. I believe in biodynamics. I don't have a huge understanding of biodynamics, but I see that what we do and the way that we do things differently to almost everybody else, and the plants that we look at are healthy. The fruit that we take off on the whole is exceptional.
I'm adding about 4 grams of quartz crystal. This has been ground down from its full form into a fine powder. Biodynamics for me is the highest level of working organically. And the idea is that you're actually working with things that you create on your own farm. There you go. I stirred it for an hour.
Cool.
It's all good to go.
What blocks do you want done first?
Maybe lion's tooth?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. I mean, this is one of the things about biodynamics that I find so fascinating. And it took me a while to kind of get my head around all this because it seemed very strange to me and very unfamiliar. And I was kind of a skeptic at first, and then I just started trialing things, and I thought, well, rather than just saying, oh, surely this can't work, why not put some things in place to figure out if it would actually work?
Because they use the biodynamic system, they follow the lunar calendar to work out the best time to do different tasks in the vineyard.
You have the ascending period, which is when the moon is rising, and the descending period when the moon is working its way back down. And still aiming for April. And what we do is decide when we're going to add a preparation or when we're going to do something in the winery. Fruit days, 17th and 18th. So if weather holds out, we can hang it out that long, and if not, then we'll just bring it in earlier.
Okay.
Okay.
The lunar calendar situation is something that I'd never dealt with before. There's a lot of, it's hocus pocus to a lot of people, and to me, to a certain extent, it still is as well, but it works. And if it works, why change it?
All their compost preparations are made from things growing on the farm. Putting them together takes a team effort.
We're going to start with the stinging nettle. So, Kate, if you want to unravel that, we're going to pull off the leaves. And there's quite a bit involved in making the preparation, so I like to bring in a team of people to do that, and it's also really fun doing it together with a group of people. We're going to crush these up with our hands, and then we've got to roll them with a rolling pin. I consider it pretty much the same as conventional fertilizer, really. It's still going out there and putting the time into the land and applying something to the land and giving the land the nutrients that it needs. It's just a different form of it, and you're in control of making it yourself. So we're putting in the eggshell to be the calcium component. So what we're going to do is give this a really good stir. Mads is just adding some more water to make it a little bit more of a liquid. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Great. So if you each could add in one specific hole your pottle, just go ahead and shake it off and onto in the soil so it goes in deep. Yeah, great. And this is the last preparation we use. And that's it.
Biodynamics involves lots of manual work. And when it's harvest time, they do it by hand and foot too. Mike and Claudia Weersing searched the world for years to find their perfect spot in North Canterbury. And that was followed by even more years of hard slog.
17 years now since we've had plants in the ground. It's been a lot of work. It's been a long haul, but we love it here. We feel grateful to be here every single day.
People think that there's this romantic side to grape growing, which there is, but at the same time, we farm just like sheep farmers. You know, it's tough. You got to get out there, you got to do the hours, and you've got to work with the weather. And, you know, we get everything from snow and rain and wind and drought. You have that opportunity to make that vintage when you get it, and I think, you know, you have to be blessed and grateful for the fruit that you do get. You could think that you're stepping into a great vintage and then end up with only a few barrels, or you get years where you end up with more.
To showcase their wines, they've converted an historic carriage house into a tasting room.
Hello. Hi, welcome to Pyramid Valley.
Hi.
Come on in.
Hi.
Good to see you.
4 home wines, 2 blocks are Chardonnay and 2 blocks being Pinot Noir.
We like to show these wines together because the 2 home Chardonnays, they're less than 500 meters from each other, the 2 blocks. The only difference between the 2 is just the soil changes and there's a slight aspect change, but that's it. Because we make our wines identically, it's important when people see those differences from glass to glass that they understand that that's coming from the site itself.
It is amazing. It's so yummy.
And more importantly, from the soil itself. And this is why we have these soil tubes here. If you've got the root mass of this vineyard exploring these soils, and then the roots exploring these soils in the other vineyard, there's no way they could be the same. And if they were the same, then it would mean that process was overriding origin, which is not what we're about.
We took the old world model and brought it to the new world, and it's a real point of difference. And we aren't a bulk wine producer, we make high quality wine.
When she gets time to take a break, Claudia uses a refurbished cottage as her own creative space.
I do a bit of crochet work in my free time. It gives me a bit of mental space and it takes me away from thinking about the business all the time. So I come down to the cottage and make something creative. I love working with my hands. I always think that your hands are your best tools. I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 24. Coming to New Zealand for me was that kind of fresh start. It was post-cancer, and you know, also just working biodynamically as well, not using any chemicals. I really wanted to try to do the best things that were for me. And of course, trying to get pregnant and could not get pregnant was a little bit difficult. You do think, wow, you know, actually you could have teenagers of your own, but you know, that's part of bringing everyone here as well, you know, all the young people that we work with. So I never feel like I've lost out on having a child because we're just surrounded by family here all the time, and it's really nice.
At Pyramid Valley Wines, harvest has come early. The country's been ravaged by a cyclone just weeks before the grapes would have been at their peak. It's caused widespread damage and devastation to vineyards across the country.
The harvest has been absolutely tragic. I mean, the whole year has just been incredibly difficult. And Cyclone Debbie came in, and it's just completely wiped us out. We're salvaging, we're doing what we can, we're trying to control the quality best that we can, but it's got to come off really quickly.
Most of the year's work has been wasted, but vineyard manager Struan McDuff has to persevere.
There's a whole lot of months go into these 2 days and not a lot of fruit coming off to pay for all the bills, for all the labour, and we're really labour intensive being biodynamic, so it's devastating. Same deal.
Meanwhile, owner Mike Wearsing has had to return to the US, leaving his wife Claudia to manage the crisis on her own.
That's all quality?
Yep.
Sometimes it's easier without your husband. You just make the decisions on your own and you just go for it, you know. I think sometimes you can ponder for too long, you know, and we have no time to ponder this year. So the stuff that's about 50% with the botrytis and 50% with the powdery,
yep,
we're going to push that through the basket press now.
Yep.
And that way that's done, and that's in a separate tank, so that we keep the quality just with the quality.
Yep.
They have to scrutinise every bunch and separate the remaining good fruit from the bunches that have been hit by mildew.
We've taken 190 kilos out of 52 rows. And that 190 kilos last year would have come out of 2. They're going through and they're looking for powdery, shrivelled fruit and botrytis, which is like a grey mould, or making the decision that no, it's not going and leaving it where it is, and it'll be fed to the birds when the nets come off next week.
And you taste it. And if it's sweet, it's good, and if it's sour, it's not good. So you just chuck it. The last 2 years we've had really, really good years, and basically you just pick every bunch and keep every bunch. And this year it's pretty rough leaving all this fruit behind. Yeah, so it's like a bit gutting.
While they're racing to salvage the surviving Pinot Noir grapes, it's even worse news for the Chardonnay. The entire block is a write-off.
It was really unfortunate that with the Chardonnay that we have, everything just split, and that was at a brix ripeness where we really couldn't work with it. So unfortunately, that's a huge loss to us. There's a lot of value in the wines here, so it's devastating.
It's their dream. They've done something that I don't think it's been done before in New Zealand, and it definitely hasn't been done the way that they've done it. They'd spent all that time looking for the best climate, the best latitude, the best soils, and this is where they found it.
It's always a risk. Everything's a risk. It's farming. I think there's so much of this romantic side of wine growing and winemaking, and I think we all have challenges just like every single farmer would, and you just can't control Mother Nature. So yeah, it's keeping on, you know. There's still future plans, there's still soils to work with here and future development, and yeah, we still dream about that and would hope that we can continue that, definitely.
Next time, a family who have a true bond with their horses.
She would hop on my herd of horses and gallop off with them with nothing on.